This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, world stocks started the week on the back foot today, slipping to 2.5-week lows on further signs of accelerating inflation, as well as tax and regulatory pressures on the world's biggest companies. Now, emerging markets were hit quite hard as MSCI's Asia-heavy emerging market equities index fell almost 1% on the day. Shares of tech giants Alibaba Group and Tencent Holdings slumped between 2.5% and 4.5% on the day. Other emerging markets were mostly muted today. South Africa's JSE was little change. Locally, hospitality-focused stocks were set for a firmer session after the government's move to a level 2 lockdown. Naspers extended losses. The group shares slipped almost 2%, and that's on reports of an impending breakup of Alipay going forward. Now, also coming up on today's show, South Africa to introduce a vaccine passport. Zimbabwe's electricity distributor schedules power cuts as long as 12 hours. And he's mastered his craft over 40 years. Now he needs to transfer the skills to future generations. Well, let's start off today's show in Accra, Ghana, where the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat is based. They've signed a pact with the UK government that should open up more trade and investment opportunities across Africa. Now, the Continental Free Trade Agreement is targeting to benefit about 1.3 billion people across the continent. And CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai has more on that for us from Accra.
The UK Minister for Africa, James Duddridge, met with the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, Wamkele Mene, in Accra to sign the pact. The agreement between the UK and AfTA Secretariat is expected to promote and facilitate future trade and investment opportunities across Africa. It will help support the implementation of the AfTA agreement and strengthen trading links between the UK and countries across Africa. The Economic Commission for Africa estimates that AfTA has the potential to boost intra-African trade by more than 50%, while the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement will create an African market for 1.3 billion people. It is also expected to yield a cumulative GDP of $3.4 trillion. The Continental Free Trade Agreement began operating in January after it was postponed last year due to the coronavirus pandemic. 40 out of 54 African countries have so far ratified the AfCFTA agreement and have begun benefiting from the intra-trade deal. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And let's head to South Africa now. The country is set to introduce a vaccine passport that can be used as proof of vaccination for various purposes and events. Now, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa made the announcement on Sunday, but did not give much detail. He also eased lockdown restrictions as the country has witnessed a sustained decline in infections over the last 2 weeks. Here's CGTN's Yulisa Njamela with more.
South Africa has now moved down to level 2 of the lockdown. That's the second lowest of a 5-tier system. The eased restrictions offer a lifeline to businesses. It's also making it easier to register voters ahead of local government elections in November. Under this level, most activities are allowed under strict rules.
The hours of curfew will now start at 11 p.m. and end at 4 a.m. There is still a need for curfew. It also means that non-essential establishments like restaurants, bars, and fitness centers will need to close by 10 p.m. This is to allow their employees and patrons to travel home before the start of the curfew. It also means that all gatherings will now be limited to a maximum of 250 people indoors. And this has been raised from the 50 people indoors, and it will now mean that outdoors it will be limited to 500 people from the 100 that we had.
The sale of alcohol from retail outlets for off-site consumption will be permitted between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. from Monday to Friday. Alcohol sales for on-site consumption will also be allowed as per license conditions up to 10 p.m. In a bid to encourage vaccination, the president also announced that his government will soon be providing further information on an approach to vaccine passports. The passports will likely be used as evidence of vaccination for various purposes and events. The president urged South Africans to vaccinate against COVID-19.
The day will soon come when we can gather again without restrictions. The day will soon come when we can fill our stadiums and music venues and travel more freely around without the fear of becoming ill or losing our loved ones. How soon that day arrives depends on one thing: how many of us get vaccinated and how quickly we get vaccinated.
Ramaphosa says the government has secured enough doses of COVID-19 jabs and that the supply of vaccines is no longer a constraint. South Africa ultimately wants to vaccinate at least 70% of the population, or 39 million people. This is to ensure that there's herd immunity against the coronavirus. The current restrictions will be reviewed in 2 weeks' time, depending on the state of the pandemic. Yudisa Njambela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's now find out more about those plans for a vaccine passport in South Africa. We're joined by Angelo Coppola. He is in Johannesburg. As always, good to have you with us, Angelo. Now, according to President Ramaphosa, that vaccine passport will be coming into effect soon. But of course, there's still quite a lot of questions about what an implementation will look like, especially given the fact that there's a lack of standardization around vaccine passports worldwide currently. Now, what more do you know about the plan, and how soon will it become a reality for South Africans?
Well, as it stands right now, Uche, the authorities haven't standardized what the electronic vaccination confirmation form looks like for internal or in-country use. Ramaphosa has suggested that passports could be used for entry into local events. And those are very easily and quickly developed, and yet we haven't seen anything yet. So let's see what's revealed in 2 weeks' time when he's due to talk to us again. Internationally, of course, I guess it's going to depend on the direction that we're going to get from internationally recognized bodies, perhaps like the WHO, in terms of what a passport or vaccination passport will look and feel like. On the question of timing, of course, that depends on the timing of the global consensus, if and when it's reached. And we know that sometimes it can take longer than usual, Uche.
And as you said, we don't know anything about it yet, but already there's a growing opposition to a vaccine passport on social media in South Africa. Some are even calling for protests across the country this Saturday. So give us a sense of the overall response to the announcement that the government is considering introducing vaccine passports.
Well, look, the strange thing is that people who travel on the continent and also travel elsewhere in the world where there is yellow fever, for example, as a notifiable disease, they know that to travel, they have to travel with a yellow fever vaccine passport. If you don't have that passport when you arrive at the customs hall of your country of destination, you're going to be turned back. So the opposition is seen by some as a Twitter rant and not worthy of comment. But there are concerns by some in the public domain, and they need to be addressed. The challenge is that if the rest of the world agrees to issue a COVID vaccine passport, those without that document won't be able to travel freely. So they'll be subjected to quarantine for 2 weeks or whatever it might be, and that's an issue. But of course, it's all going to depend on global acceptance, Uche.
Well, according to President Ramaphosa, the country could be facing a fourth wave of infections around December, and that's as we're seeing vaccine hesitancy in the country. So what progress is the country making in getting the population vaccinated so far?
Well, look, as it stands today, there are 7.2 million people who have been fully vaccinated. So either one J&J jab or 2 Pfizer jabs. That's just 12.3% of the population. And on that fourth wave, I'm told that it could arrive in South Africa as soon as December. What's worrying most experts, though, is that vaccinations aren't progressing on target. Government has taken to open up registration to more age groups to try and get more people in earlier than anticipated. And we've seen recently when they opened that up to the 18 to 35-year-olds, there was a big uptick in terms of vaccinations before their planned date. But the issue here is really the people who haven't been vaccinated, those are the elderly or those over 50s, because that number is larger than anticipated. And the problem there is if those people get sick and they're not vaccinated, they're very likely to be hospitalized. And South African hospitals aren't going to be equipped to handle that fourth wave when it comes in December. So it's a bit of a challenge, and it's uncertain how it's going to be dealt with to get those older people into the vaccination queues. Uche.
Right. Well, we'll continue to watch that closely. Many thanks, as always, Angelo, for your insight. That was Angelo Coppola joining us there in Johannesburg. Let's head to Zimbabwe now, where industries are bracing for tough times ahead as the country's energy utility begins implementing a load-shedding schedule that could see about 12-hour-long blackouts going forward. Here's Farai Mwakutuya with more.
Zimbabwe's electricity transmission and distribution company says generation challenges at the Hwange thermal power plant and rehabilitation work to the Kariba Dam wall, where there is a hydropower plant, have caused an electricity shortfall, which it is trying to manage through these lengthy power cuts. Zimbabwe requires about 2,100 megawatts of electricity per day, but is only generating between 1,200 and 1,300. It relies on imports from neighboring South Africa and Mozambique to bridge the deficit. Businesses, industries and farms will not be spared from the latest rounds of power cuts and fear that it could scuttle their efforts to rebound from the COVID-19 crisis.
Technically, we remain in a different kind of lockdown, but the lockdown we're having now, it could be non-COVID related lockdown, which is electricity challenge. So that alone can tell you that we are in for a long haul as business, and it's impacting definitely in terms of our production, especially from the manufacturing side. But with power shortages, what it means therefore is shifts are limited, some of the costs are fixed and you can't avoid them, and that will eat onto the bottom line of most of the companies in the country.
Zimbabwe's long-running energy crisis has been worsened by aging power plants, which often break down, and so new power projects are desperately needed to meet increasing demand. An upgrade of the main thermal power plant in Hwange, which will increase generation capacity by 600 megawatts, is currently underway. Several independent power producers have had their solar and mini hydropower projects approved. Major thermal power plants are also on the cards, but are long-term in nature and are only expected to start producing electricity in 2023. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And now look at our corporate headlines today. The state energy company of Angola, Sonangol, posted a $3 billion loss last year. That's after demand drastically dropped following coronavirus-induced lockdowns across the world. Now the loss, the biggest in at least 10 years, compares with a net income of $125 million in 2019. And Kenya's first budget airline has started flights into the eastern city of Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Jambojet says it's looking to tap into a projected lift in demand for air travel in Africa. The carrier expects the continent to become one of the fastest growing regions for aviation in the world within the next 2 decades, with average annual expansion of nearly 5%. And car company AutoCheck and Roam Africa have entered into an agreement for AutoCheck to acquire automotive marketplaces Cheki Kenya and Cheki Uganda as AutoCheck expands into the African market. The move comes just 1 year after AutoCheck successfully acquired Cheki Nigeria and Ghana as part of its launch in West Africa. And a Dutch court has ruled that Uber drivers are employees and are entitled to greater workers' rights under local labor laws, handing a setback to the US company's European business model. It was another court victory following a similar decision this year about Uber in Britain for unions fighting for better pay and benefits. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. We look at how farmers in Africa are cutting losses after harvesting by up to 30%. And Sudan opens its railway network for investment after years of negligence and deterioration.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Now, compared to 2016, farmers in Africa have been able to reduce post-harvest losses by between 20 and 30%. That is according to Rockefeller Foundation, who launched their YieldWise initiative then. It has also identified more than 100 million tons of surplus food per year that can be rescued and redistributed to American families. Well, as last week's Agra Forum ended, we're talking all about agriculture. Let's get some more insight into the continent's transformational agenda. We're joined by Betty Kibara. She's the Director of Food Initiatives at the Rockefeller Foundation. Great to have you with us today, Betty. Now, this year, of course, last week, rather, we had the Agra Forum. They announced the Agra Status Report, and that report pointed to the fact that Africa's food systems still remain pretty fragile, despite some little progress in the agriculture sector. So, having done some work in helping reduce post-harvest food losses on the continent, how do you assess the progress made on those setbacks so far?
Thank you so much. I must begin by saying that AGRA's main goal is to advance an inclusive agricultural transformation, linking millions of smallholder farmers to agribusinesses and creating food supply chain employment opportunities for many peoples in Africa. And you're right, the AGRA AGRF status report actually reports tremendous progress that has been made since 2000 to 2018 of about 4.5% annually. And I can say, for example, looking at the work that AGRA has done, reaching over 25 million smallholder farmers, catalyzing $800 million of private sector capital investment, and supporting more than 40,000 agro dealers who are really helping many countries improve access to agricultural inputs for many smallholder farmers. And in that way, we have also seen an improvement in productivity, incomes. We have also seen farmers having a little bit more food and more months of surplus production. And we've also seen adoption of increase in adoption of technologies. And so back to your question, even though a lot of progress has been made, the report also highlights that roughly, even though we have seen an increase in production, 75% of agricultural production growth is really coming from expansion of the area under the cropland, and only about 25% is coming from yield improvement. And when we look at the food systems in Africa, we are seeing food systems in Africa, which is also imposing very high, massive cost on human health. Foods are also contributing to obesity and non-communicable diseases. And so what we are saying is that as we build resilient Africa and sustainable Africa, we must make sure that we are adopting policies and making investment that really minimize the damage on the human health and also our environment. And, you know, that said, we also know that Africa, we are still grappling with many challenges, and we continue to work to address this, including improving the need to improve efficient input delivery system for our smallholder farmers, improving access to high-yielding seeds, and also many other technologies.
Quite right. And of course, Rockefeller has had its hand in a number of projects in the agricultural sector. So when we talk about Africa's agricultural transformation and things such as clustering agricultural production, post-harvest management, agro-processing going forward, what are some of the projects that you can point to on the continent or across the world that Africa can learn from as we try and transform?
Yes, 5 years ago, the Rockefeller Foundation launched what we call the Yield-Wise Initiative, being wise about the yield, and to address the issue of post-harvest losses. As you know, we lose more than 30% of what the continent produces. And so the Rockefeller Foundation wanted to make, we had a goal of raising awareness on post-harvest losses and also proving models that can work. So one of the things we did is we integrated access to market, training of farmers, access to post-harvest technologies, and also access to finance. Overall, in the last 5 years, we've seen post-harvest loss reducing by about 20 to 30% for more than 300,000 farmers in Africa. So to answer your question, some of the projects that we can highlight, for example, in Tanzania, in partnership with AGRA, we have worked to support more than 200,000 farmers to access low-cost hermetic bags. These are bags which allow them to store their maize for more than 1 year. And therefore, the farmers are not using pesticides for them to store the grains and the pulses, and so they are also able to hold their grains for a longer time and get better prices. In Kenya, for example, we have seen a very high adoption of the fruit fly traps, and the mango fruit fly actually causes 60% of the post-harvest losses in the mango. And so what we have done in partnership with the Makueni County government and the government of Kenya, USAID and other partners, we are now scaling the fruit fly trap so that we can increase the adoption among many farmers. And this is also facilitating re-entry or the reopening of the Kenyan mango for export to UK and Europe, perhaps later in the year.
Now, of course, I have to ask, any insight into any new projects that the foundation is looking into that will support innovation, especially as we look to enhance food security in Africa?
Sure. The Rockefeller Foundation commitment is sustainable food systems in Africa, and is based on the main ambition, the attainment of sustainable and healthier diets for all. So just to highlight one of the key innovation at the Rockefeller Foundation, as you all know, that open air food markets serve as a critical nexus between the producers and the consumers in Africa. But we face very, very many challenges in the market, including high post-harvest losses at the market. We've also seen poor waste management and sanitation, and availability sometimes of power supply. So what the Rockefeller Foundation is doing, one of the innovation, is what we are calling the smart food markets of the future, where we have been given an opportunity to rethink or reimagine how an open market of the future could look like, that harnesses solar energy, and then we can use that energy for cold storage, for mini processing to reduce the food loss and waste, and can also power the market for the vendors, for e-mobility, and for other businesses. And we have an opportunity. We are piloting one such smart fish market in Kenya, in a place called Naivasha, which is going to be up and running sometimes next year. And then also the Rockefeller Foundation is also keen in terms of, we have launched the Global Energy Alliance, which is going to catalyze $1 billion of investment, half of it coming from the Rockefeller Foundation, half of it coming from IKEA Foundation. And here we are going to be focusing on financing distributed renewable energy, or what we're calling the decentralized mini grid powered by solar and other renewable sources. And I think for me here, the main highlight is that being able to tap into the renewable energy can also support many farming community and agricultural enterprises through the solar irrigation, through farm mechanization, food processing, cold storage, and many more. It's very exciting for the Rockefeller Foundation.
Right. Well, thank you so much. We do have to leave it there, but thank you for your great insights. That, of course, is Betty Kibara. She's the Director of Food Initiatives at the Rockefeller Foundation. Well, let's move on now to Sudan. The country's railway was once a giant economic engine for the country and Africa as well, but a combination of mismanagement, economic sanctions, and negligence in recent decades saw the sector collapse in importance. Now, Sudan is opening up investment in an attempt to restore the railway and its contribution to its economy. Here's Naba Mohidin reporting from Khartoum.
These tracks were built by the British between 1897 and 1930. Linking Sudan and Egypt, the railway was considered key to the country's economy, handling the import and export of commodities. But a series of controversial government decisions in the 1980s led the system to fall into disrepair. Now Khartoum is moving to revive the railway, starting with the passenger service.
I prefer the train for the short time it takes and to avoid the traffic jam. A third reason is the low cost. I take the train for 50 Sudanese pounds only, but the bus is 150 pounds from the railway station to the next bus stop.
90% of railway facilities have been out of service for decades. Trucks in some areas like Al Jazeera State were sold as a scrap metal.
This railway authority once had the biggest network in Africa, mobilizing trade and services for the continent and Sudan as well. Years of negligence put these old tracks and locomotives in a state of inactivity, but Sudanese people still have a glimmer of hope that Sudan Railway could again be back on track.
In 1997, the US government under President Bill Clinton slapped sanctions on Sudan for its alleged support of international terrorism and human rights violations. The sanctions crippled much of the economy, including the railway corporation. But the lifting of US sanctions last December allows Sudan to bring the railroad back to life.
One of the pieces of good news after Sudan opened to the world, Sudan started to communicate with giant companies, communicate with manufacturing corporations directly, and order spare parts without a mediator. That will help boost the effectiveness of our resources and the operations efficiency.
Sudan is in talks with Chinese state firms to restore the trains and damaged tracks. A $60 million deal was signed last year with China to import 27 trains meant for public transport in and around Khartoum.
This project is important and very big. We have great hopes that it will bring great change to the railway corporation. The railway declined not only in the past 30 years, but years before that.
The new Chinese locomotives are expected to increase domestic passenger traffic and improve the capacity to handle goods and services. Sudan hopes these new partnerships will put the railway and the economy on the right track. Naba Muhiddin, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still coming up on the show. The world's largest carbon-sucking plant opens in Iceland. And we look at why tourists are streaming to South Africa.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens happens there, or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. And now here's a quick recap of other headlines this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has held talks with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. That's following his visit to the North African nation. The two leaders discussed regional and bilateral issues, as well as the revival of the Israel-Palestine peace process, which collapsed in 2014. This is the first official trip by an Israeli head of government to Egypt in a decade. And in Nigeria, an unidentified gunman attacked a jail in Kogi State and set free 240 inmates. That's according to a prison service spokesperson. He said numerous attackers engaged the guards in a fierce gun battle. Now, security agencies are pursuing the gang. The statement by the spokesperson has not indicated casualties from either side involved in that gunfight. And a rift between the president and his prime minister continues in Somalia. Closed-door talks on Friday and Saturday have failed to reconcile the two sides. The president and the prime minister have been feuding over the dismissal and appointment of key security officials. And finally, leaders from ousted President Alpha Conde's political party in Guinea, the Rally of the Guinean People, have now resolved to attend a consultative meeting following last week's coup. At a meeting on Monday in Conakry, the party leader said a key concern is the release of the deposed president. Of course, Condé was arrested and detained after the military takeover. The army has promised to form a government of national unity. And that's a recap of other headlines this hour. Now, the world's largest plant that sucks carbon dioxide directly from the air and deposits it underground has now commenced operations. Swiss startup Climeworks AG partnered with Icelandic carbon storage firm Carbfix to develop the plant that sucks out up to 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year. That is the equivalent of the annual emissions from about 790 cars. Now, according to the International Energy Agency, global carbon dioxide emissions totaled an estimated 31.5 billion tons in 2020.
We have just turned into operation our Orca plant, which is the largest direct air capture plant currently operational in the world, with a capacity of 4,000 tons of CO2 that are captured from the air every year. So that's the nominal capacity. And we are then handing over this CO2 to our partners from Carbfix, who inject it underground. And the CO2 there is mineralized with the basalt rock. So and it's turned into stone, literally. And that is happening within a period of 2 years. So that's the really most safe and most permanent method of removing CO2 from the atmosphere that is currently available on the market. Our plant is taking CO2 out of the air, and we are then storing it underground, and we are offering that as a service to both private and corporate customers. So we call our customers pioneers for carbon dioxide removal. So as a private individual, you could go to our website, climeworks.com, and we will remove a certain amount of CO2 from the air every month and permanently remove it by then storing it underground for you.
Well, let's head to Italy now, where producers are hoping a geographical indication agreement between the EU and China will help boost exports and also help their recovery from the pandemic. Now, the deal, which formally came into effect on March 1st, aims to raise awareness of traditional products while protecting both producers and consumers. While CGTN's Hermione Kitson reports from Parma, the home of Italy's most famous ham.
Prosciutto di Parma is a jewel of the Made in Italy brand, a tradition that's been handed down for generations. For the Sassi family, production dates back 120 years.
Prosciutto di Parma is really traditional product because it's really connected with the Parma area for the special weather condition that we have in Parma.
It's one of 26 premium Italian products in a new European geographical indication agreement with China that came into effect in March.
It's a protection also not only for our producers but also for the consumers because they know that when they buy prosciutto di Parma, they buy the authentic one.
Other products of excellence on the list include Parmigiano Reggiano and Modena's balsamic vinegar.
A GI is more than a product, it's actually an heritage of a community.
The pigs must be bred in Italy with a specific diet, be at least 9 months old and weigh on average 170 kilos.
The skin of the prosciutto, we have the passport of every single leg that we produce because we have the tattoo of the farm where the pig is born.
Along the production line, no additives are used.
Prosciutto di Parma is a completely natural product. The ingredient is only the Italian sea salt, Italian pork meat, thyme and love.
After being cured for at least 12 months, each prosciutto undergoes rigorous checks before being given the crown of approval.
So this is the guarantee of authenticity of Parma ham.
Italy started exporting prosciutto di Parma to China 10 years ago. Since then, it's become the second biggest market in Asia, with 25,000 hams sent there each year. It's a lot fewer than the 600,000 exported to the US each year, but the Chinese market can't be underestimated.
I think the Chinese market have a very big potential because the Chinese customer, they have a very important knowledge how to consume pork meat.
Producers are confident that slowly but surely this GI agreement with China will boost exports and help in the country's pandemic recovery. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Parma.
Now, as China zooms towards modernization, along with stress levels, urban residents are now seeing an increased interest in meditation. The National Health Commission even issued a statement in February 2020 suggesting meditation as a form of relieving anxiety from the yet unknown coronavirus pandemic. Well, our reporter Xia Ji finds out if there's promise for meditation to grow a sizable market in the country.
Meditation is an ancient practice that is believed to have originated as early as 1500 BC in India. It reached the Western world by the 1700s, inspiring interest in Eastern models of spirituality. It further gained popularity in modern times thanks to scientific studies launched into the impact of meditation on mental and physical outcomes. Studies on meditation show that the brain's amygdala, a stress response center, is significantly less active after meditation. It also showed that the prefrontal cortex and insular volume of the brain, which are key to increased awareness and clarity in decision-making, are somewhat larger in people who meditate for long periods of time. In China, meditation is a familiar word for many who live in the mainland's big bustling metropolitan cities. China's economy is developing rapidly thanks to its hardworking citizens. But it comes at a price. This is why people are coming to this mindfulness and meditation research center in Beijing.
We know that people in the workplace are now living a fast-paced life and are under a lot of pressure, so people may experience some anxiety and depression. So many white-collar workers come here to learn techniques to relax and reduce stress, regulate their emotions, increase their sense of well-being, and improve their mental health.
Data from the Chinese Ministry of Health states that the number of people suffering from varying degrees of mental or psychological disorders in China is estimated to be 190 million. This means that at least 1 in 10 of the country's 1.4 billion population seek or need some form of help for their psychological problems. Analysts say China, just like the US, can take up a big share of the world's meditation market. But some say there is still a long way to go for that to happen.
With a per capita income of over $60,000 in the US and just over $10,000 in China, there is still a relatively large gap in the level of development and therefore a difference in attitude towards products, services, new ideas and concepts, especially for the more advanced stuff. The meditation market in China will certainly have room for development, but it will certainly be a small and beautiful market in China and will not be an activity that is widely accepted, recognized, and promoted.
Right now, several Chinese internet companies are competing fiercely to get the first wave of the Chinese users on their respective apps. Headspace and Calm are software packages already taking up more than 3/4 of the market share worldwide. It remains to be seen whether the Chinese users will be keen on adapting any of these homegrown meditation apps into their lifestyles. Xijia, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, local and international tourists are now streaming to one of South Africa's most iconic hotels. The Kruger Shalati, or the Train on the Bridge, is a first-of-its-kind facility in Africa. Construction and development of the hotel started in 2019, but completion was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. While CGTN Sumitra Naidu visited the Train Hotel in the Kruger National Park and shares her experience.
The Shalati Bridge was built in 1890 and for decades remained the only entry point into the vast Kruger Park. Since 1973, no trains have been on the tracks until now.
It ran until around 1973 when that was stopped and the railway tracks were lifted. The train bridge just became an asset that was photographed.
The Tebe Tourism Group took up the challenge of turning the Shalati Bridge into a luxury hotel. The group's ideas were futuristic and innovative. It was hard to imagine back in 2019 the full extent of how this vision would materialize.
All of the train carriages are now being refurbished. Once this carriage is complete, it will have all of the amenities of a 5-star hotel room.
The end result was exactly that. The Train on the Bridge now houses 24 luxury rooms. The old train carriages have been fitted out with fine finishes by local designers.
It's amazing how much they managed to fit into these carriages. It's still comfortable and luxurious at the same time. And these massive windows provide the most magnificent view of the Kruger National Park.
Even the forest rain shower and bathtub can be enjoyed while taking in the scenery. Suspended over the Sabi River in the south of the Kruger National Park now stands an iconic tourism experience. The attention to detail is exceptional, yet simple, allowing visitors to take in their surroundings.
The international recognition has really been phenomenal. We've been recognized by Time Magazine's Top 100 Places of 2021, Travel and Leisure's IT List for 2021. We've also been nominated in the World Travel Awards, which is currently taking place, as the best new luxury product in Africa.
Kruger Shalati definitely stands out as proudly South African. As part of the concession, it was agreed that locals would be employed and included in an ownership scheme.
We've hired approximately 190 people, and I would say 90% of them comes from the surrounding communities, where unemployment in the youth is sitting as high as 74%.
I used to come here as a child. To see it now in my older years with what Shalati has done in terms of refurbishing, but still keeping that industrial look where it's more inviting, more family friendly. It's really a beautiful sight to see.
The hotel launched during this COVID pandemic, but that has done little to deter guests. The train and the bridge was fully booked in the first week of opening in mid-December last year. That's no surprise. Having spent the night here, it's clear that this is definitely a 5-star experience worth the visit. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Kruger National Park, South Africa.
Well, on that note, let's shift focus now and take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices rose, supported by concerns over shuttered output in the U.S., the world's biggest producer. Now, analysts expected a stable market in coming months as Brent has been range-bound between $70 and $74 a barrel in the last 3 weeks. Meanwhile, gold prices stuck in a narrow range with cautious investors awaiting readings on U.S. consumer prices that could be crucial to the U.S. Fed's decision on when to exit its super supportive policy. Cocoa prices continue to climb as global cocoa production is forecast to reach over 5 million tons this season. That's up about 2.4% from the previous projection. Let's take a short break now, still coming up on the show. More on the Egyptian master craftsman seeking to keep his 40-year-old skills alive for generations to come.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's head to Ghana now. As its economy tries to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, the government wants to bridge the unemployment gap amongst its youth. Now, the unemployment rate in the country is nearly 5%, according to government data, but youth unemployment is more than double that. Well, a 2-day job and career fair has been held in Accra to link unemployed youth to job vacancies within the private sector. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports.
Jemima Boateng is at the Job and Career Fair in Accra to search for employment. She graduated from the university 3 years ago. She says it's been difficult getting a job with her degree in accounting.
I've tried severally. The most funny thing about it is when you don't get feedback or response, especially when you apply online. There are some you go and then most of them, they even take money, especially if you are doing through an agency.
12% of Ghana's youth are unemployed. This job fair, organized by the Youth Employment Agency, hopes to bridge the unemployment gap. More than 50 private companies are at this job fair to advertise vacancies. A platform has been created here for job seekers to go through live interviews with employers. According to government data, more than 40,000 people in Ghana lost their jobs during the COVID-19 lockdown last year. As the country's economy tries to recover from the pandemic, employers want to now fill vacancies.
More of the job seekers kind of need orientation in which field they should actually apply for. Because the challenges that we're having here is that when they come, they just need a job. So they're like open to all jobs without specifying which kind of job they want to actually do. So we find it very difficult placing people at a specific position.
This fair aims to link 3,000 unemployed youth to jobs within the private sector. The Youth Employment Agency says it will create other platforms to get more young people employed or help them create their own jobs.
We've realized that not everybody who came here will be employed. It's a fact. One is either the people are more than the vacancies available, or the requirement is higher than those who are here. But again, we agree that there are some young men and women who have wonderful ideas and have good business plans. So as part of our initiative, from next week, we also open a portal where young men and women who have business ideas can upload their plans there.
While Jemima Boateng has submitted her CVs to potential employers at this fair, she says she is uncertain she will get a job soon. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Now, the number of investments and deals brokered in Egypt's startup sector is witnessing fast-paced growth. Data shows Egyptian startups recorded the highest venture capital investment in the Middle East and North African region, about $190 million, which was up 30% compared to 2020. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
Ahmed Nunu is a co-founder of Garment.io, a Cairo-based startup that was established in 2017 to provide management solutions for garment factories.
Garment.io is an IoT-based software as a service, or actually it's a hardware and a software as a service that helps garment factories increase their productivity by gathering data from the production lines and uncovering inefficiencies. The factories that we worked with had increased their productivity by 15 to 20% at least, which is massive increase, which helps the factories to increase their productivity and their competitiveness in a very tough market.
One client that has benefited from this service is local clothing brand Raven.
Once we built our factory, we faced some problems with the workers' efficiency and to reach the required production. So we found Garment.io. They actually helped us a lot with installing the system and building the spirit for the team to how to increase their capacity and how to achieve their targets, and it helps a lot. Now every one of the staff can see his achievements of the targets, and everyone is running towards his targets. So that's why the efficiency of all over the factory became much better than it was before Garment.io.
Startups in Egypt have collected 26% of all deals in the Middle East and North Africa in the first half of 2021. According to Amr Mahfouz, CEO of IT Industrial Development Agency ITIDA, there's been a compound annual growth rate of 100% in the last 5 years. And the government-owned ITIDA has been a main player in this startup boom.
We have a diversified government incentives program that is dynamic. We regularly revisit the incentives program to make sure that it is directed toward attracting the right investors and in the right areas that are of interest to us, the emerging technologies. We have investment, government investment that is increasing year over year. Government is investing heavily in providing training programs to our talent pool, and we do train on technical aspects.
Garment.io and other success stories have capitalized from the recent facilities provided by the state.
We in Garment.io have been lucky to get a lot of support from the government. So we got incubated with TEEK, and TEEK is an incubator that is created by the government of Egypt. And we have also got investments from Egypt Ventures, which is also supported by the Ministry of International Cooperation here. We got support from everyone, from the ministers, even the Prime Minister himself is very supportive to what we do.
270 new startups have been established so far in 2021. With $200 million investments, total funding increased 30% year-on-year in 2020, compared to 13% in the whole of the MENA region. This is a testament of the potential in the North African country for young entrepreneurs. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, an Egyptian craftsman living in Algeria is hoping to leave behind a legacy of making furniture using palm branches. He hopes to achieve this by training the younger generation. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro with his story.
Surrounded by palm branches, Egyptian craftsman Abu Nasser uses his hands and feet to craft bespoke furniture in his workshop in the small town east of Algiers.
I inherited this craft from our ancestors. I've been doing this job for more than 40 years. I don't earn a lot, but even if I had, I couldn't dream of leaving this job. It runs in my blood. I have been doing it for 40 years and I know all the tiny details about it. I don't believe that anyone can leave a job they have been doing for 40 years and forget about it easily.
Survival and decades-long legacy to uphold led Nasser to move from Egypt to Algeria.
I came here to work because I couldn't feed my children and had to immigrate to be able to live. After all, I am in an Arab country. It isn't real immigration and I could go back to my country at any time.
The decision to move paid off. Business is good for the Abu Nasser family, who have received increased orders for furniture since relocating.
God doesn't leave any of his servants. Our furniture is like a dessert. Only those who can afford it buy it. God helps us and we are working and earning money.
From handcrafted tables and chairs to wind chimes, the craft was passed down to Abu Nasser through generations of his family, and he is determined to keep it alive and train others in the work before moving back to Egypt.
I would like to teach it to Algerian youth because sooner or later I will go back to my country, and if I go tomorrow, this work will disappear after 14 years of working here in Algeria. But if a young man or 2, 10 or 20 learnt this craft, it will become an Algerian craft and they will spread it in the country and it will be a country craft.
His apprentice hopes to continue his legacy of crafting furniture after Abu Nasser leaves.
I chose this job and later hope to teach it and spread it in all the Algerian cities so it doesn't disappear, to pass it down to our children in the future as Uncle Nasser has done.
A change in location forged Nasser's calling. He can only hope that the age-old skills he has shared will be enough to carry his legacy forward to the generations to come. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand recovering lost ground today. It traded 0.3% higher, and that's after President Ramaphosa said COVID-19 curbs will be eased from Monday. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira slumping to an all-time low at the parallel market. It currently hovers at around 545 naira per dollar. Now, that slump at the black market comes on the heels of increased forex demand pressure and, of course, a sharp decline in dollar supply in the country. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.